Hey friends, I'm Stephen Webb, or Swebb is actually what my friends call me. We are friends, even across, many miles, kilometers, oceans. We are still friends. And so I'm Swebb, and I'm super honored to be in a conversation with you today. I know I was in some conversations earlier with Simon, a phenomenal leader and a good friend, even after a few years and again, a few miles apart. So I love being invited today to speak with you. So I'll jump right in if that's all right. I'm also going to reference some notes here on my computer. I promise, generally speaking, I'm paying attention and I'm being focused, but I'm going to look down at some notes here so we can really do some heavy lifting today. Also to set your tone here, this will not be one of those preaching, inspirational, motivational speeches. I want you to like dig in, take some notes, even if you tune out because you're chasing something on your notebook of like, oh, I need to really think more about that. Do that. That's fine. Maybe this video will be available to you at some other time in the future as well. That's fine. But I want this to be a workshop. This is not me just saying nice, fluffy things for the next few minutes. So I'm going to jump right in and say this. I know we all need leaders in the church context especially, but I would say that's true for anywhere. We need some leaders. And it seems as though that other church or that other organization always has more leaders. They've got better leaders. And so there's this problem. There's a deficit that somehow we all face, that we can't find enough leaders. And I just said something right there. I don't think you find leaders, and I'll get to that in a minute. So problem number one, we might have the wrong mindset, and I want to hopefully correct that, help you maybe move past that here in just a minute. But at the end of the day, I think all that comes from this place of, or from this place here. I think we get a little bit too creative and we make leadership, and then of course building leaders, we make it hard. Have you ever done that? Have you ever done something and you're like, man, I feel like this should be a lot easier. I don't know if you do Legos, but I build Legos. I like Legos. I buy them for my kids, but then I do them. I build them. So, but eventually it's like, wow, I'm really making this difficult. The instructions are here. They're for an 8-year-old, but here I'm making it difficult. I think it's something we do. And I was talking to a group of church planners actually just a few days ago, and we kind of had a similar conversation where I feel like, especially in the church world, we feel it's okay to make things difficult. I know we don't consciously think that, but I think sometimes we have this complex of like, hey, we are the savior of the world. No, Jesus is. But we have all this responsibility to change the world. And so every problem should be our problem. And everything we do, we should take and make it 4 steps harder. And because excellence is the goal. And all these great kind of cliche statements. And all that sounds noble and it sounds fine. I do the same thing. Originally, I love to make things difficult. But recently, I've changed a little bit. I've slowed down a little bit. I speak really fast like this all the time. I'd love to get a lot of this content out to you, and maybe you can watch it slower later. But even that's another example of how I like to make things difficult. But I've started to slow down. I realized something. Man, this can't be as hard as I'm making it. So that was the problem I have. Maybe that's a problem you have. So I wanted to kind of rewind a little bit. What the heck did Jesus do to find his leaders? But I don't think he found leaders. He built leaders. He formed leaders. So here's the deal. Leadership is influence. Influence is moving people. Therefore, leaders move people. Like, that's pretty simple. I know that we could explore a lot of different definitions and working definitions, but leadership is influence. Influence is moving people, and leaders move people. So don't be a creative leader. Be a leader who's creative. Again, don't make it overly complex. Just be a leader who is creative. So in figuring that out, having that simple definition of leadership and influence, man, what did Jesus do? And I've identified, this was helpful for me. I'm just kind of giving you an insight into one of my Bible studies. 3 relatively simple things that Jesus was always doing well. 3 relatively simple things that Jesus was always doing well. In my notes, I called this remedial leadership. I don't know about you, but over here in the States, we've got these, if you're not quite good enough to go to the next math class, you got to have like the remedial class to kind of catch up. So that's what I called it. For me, that was helpful. Sometimes you do need to go back to the simple stuff, and that's what I've done here. Hopefully you catch up. Hopefully you enjoy this. Hopefully this will be helpful to you. So I'm gonna jump right in. These are gonna be 3 R's, at least in my language. I did not do a lot of good work to learn the language of your land. Simon gave me some examples earlier, and there was no way I was gonna say that. But anyway, in my case, these are 3 R's. Alliteration is helpful for memory sometimes, but I'm assuming this will also translate well where you are, wherever you sit, and also just in the context in which you lead. So I'll jump in here. Jesus was always good at responding. Jesus was always good at responding. I'm going to give you some examples. We're going to do a little Bible study real quick. Matthew 8:2. Remember after the Sermon on the Mount, which takes up like 3 chapters of your Bible there was a leprous man that suddenly appeared. And Jesus is like, all right, and he handles that. 3 verses later, 8:5, the Roman officer who wanted the servant, remember he wanted the servant girl healed? Jesus even offered to go there. He was that present. Right after the Sermon on the Mount, big preaching tour stop. And right after that, he's like, okay, I'll go there. Of course, he didn't need to do that. Roman officer's like, we're good. 8:14, a few verses later, Peter's mother-in-law was sick, right? Jesus went and helped her out. She got up, started cooking dinner. That's a fantastic healing moment. 8:16. Chapter 8, verse 16. In evening, it says many of the demon possessed were brought to him. He was present for that. He was available and present, accessible. It's weird. I mean, I've already listed more things than you've probably done this week. Some of us leaders. Sometimes it's like, I got to have my study time. I've got to do my thing. And here Jesus was just always responsive. He was always not available. He would withdraw, but he was responsive. I'm going to keep going. 8:28. He went across the lake to heal the demon-possessed man. He went across the lake, and if you read it, he went across the lake, healed that guy in that cemetery, and that was the whole pig thing, and then went back across the lake. He went all the way over there to respond to that man. Let's see, chapter 9, verse 2. Remember, the paralyzed man was brought to him. 9:4. He even responded to his critics. Now, listen, I don't think you should chase every critic on Instagram. I don't think anytime the news media has something to say about your church, you should have some sort of reaction to it. But my point is, Jesus was responsive. He was good at responding. That showed a real good personal connection. Here's what else. He was present. When you're responsive, it indicates that you're very present in that moment with those people. I'm going to keep going. Chapter 9, verse 9, he called Matthew. Remember, so he's walking down the street. He sees Matthew sitting at a tax collector booth over there. He's like, hey, come on, let's go hang out a little bit. So he was responsive, even there, was present to notice on the way somewhere else. That's when he saw and called Matthew. Chapter 9, verse 18, as he was talking, it says, then a church leader wanted his daughter raised back to life. Chapter 9, verse 20, just then, on the way to handle that other scenario, that other situation, just then it says, a woman with bleeding came up and interrupted. I mean, I just listed those right there. You can do your own Bible study. You can look through the rest of the Gospels as well. But Jesus was present. He was present. So here's some clarity though. I don't think you have to be instantly available, but you should be dependably accessible, right? You can have your calendar, and you can sit in your spot and do your things, and you need to get your stuff done. You need to be a present father, and you need to be a present husband and wife. You need to do these things for sure. But at the same time, you could be accessible. You can be accessible. I feel like sometimes if we feel like, I can't really do that, so then it becomes a wholesale excuse to not do it for anybody. Maybe y'all know Andy Stanley, or at least have heard of or listened to Andy Stanley. He has that great principle, do for one what you wish you could do for others, what you wish you could do everyone. So just because you can't do it for everyone doesn't mean you shouldn't, give it a shot. And I feel like Jesus did a great job of that, indicating that he's present. He's with the people he's called to lead and serve. Here's another thing. You can be physically close to someone and not present. Have you noticed that? You can be physically close and not present. If you have a cell phone, then you know that. If you have an iPhone, you definitely know that. If you're on Instagram, on your iPhone, you definitely know what it's like to sit next to somebody and not be present. At the same time, you could be miles apart and be very near somebody. You ever seen that too? I don't know if you've ever did the distance dating thing, maybe at college or something like that. Maybe you've experienced that, but it's not always about that physical proximity. So you can't simply be near somebody and check the box and say, hey, I'm present. I feel like you've got to put some intention into it. Presence is felt, I think, more than it's seen. I think it travels across space and time. You know what it's like to be on somebody else's mind. Let me take a little tangent real quick. Some of you right now, matter of fact, let's just all do this. Take a minute and text somebody, hey, I had you on the mind. I thought of you. I hope you're doing well. Send somebody a text right now and do that. And see the power in that moment right there. There's a funny little statement. You can put this on Instagram. There's no better place to be than on someone else's mind. You know that. You know it's good to be well thought of. You know what it's like when somebody says, I thought of you, and you haven't heard from them in a few months? That's that power of presence. Presence of mind, to know that you want to be kind of present with your people, especially the people you lead. I feel like a lot of times we have a hard time finding leaders, building leaders, forming leaders, because at the end of the day, we're just not present. We just kind of swoop in, do some church work, complain about not having leaders, and get back out. We're not present. But even on the way, Jesus was interrupted many, many times, and he viewed those interruptions as invitations to continue to grow the church. I know that the church in that context wasn't in existence then. This is Jesus forming that. But you know what I'm saying. He used those interruptions as invitations to do something pretty powerful. So a question, of course, how present are you with those that you lead? How present are you with those that you lead? Can you prove it? Would they back that up? Would they say that? I don't know that you should always run your church or your teams and your organizations by polls and opinions, but you might want to ask them. Just ask a few people, hey, listen, do you feel like when I'm with you that I'm with you? Do you feel like there's an opportunity for me to connect better, deeper? Is there something where I might be missing in our connection? Ask them that. And by the way, it might be that you're not doing anything wrong. You're just doing something that's not effective that you don't know about. You got to understand, as a leader, you run a little faster than the people you lead. Okay? And so maybe just the awareness to ask them, and then they bring an awareness to you, that helps you slow down and be more present. So Jesus, again, had a brilliant, amazing ability to respond because he was always present in that moment. So how present are you with those that you lead? Are you keenly aware of the state of those that you lead? Here's a couple of practical questions. You can look in your inbox, your email inbox right now. But like, what text have you not responded to? What email is still sitting in your inbox that you have not replied to? Those are some simple ones. Do you have a leader, maybe a financial contributor at your church or your organization? Maybe there's even a city official that you have yet to meet with, all because you haven't made it a priority. Maybe you were on the way to another priority, just like Jesus. Some interruption comes along and you saw it as an interruption, therefore you moved on. Maybe that's, again, that email, that's that text, that's that meeting somebody's been asking for. Just take inventory. What's left to be done? What have you not responded to yet? Start checking some of those things off your list. Get back in the rhythm of connecting, of responding, of being present with the people you lead. And I bet that would change the game for many of you right there. So I think Jesus was great at following. I think Jesus had a great following because he saw, because he saw everyone, not just everyone. I'm going to get me a drink. Excuse me. I'm going to say that again. I think Jesus had a great following because he saw everyone, not everyone. Let me back up. Hopefully this translates in your language too, those of you who don't speak English quite as clear. Every space one, meaning every individual. Jesus saw that. And I feel like a lot of times in church world, as we are trying to chase a growing organization, this goal to grow a church, grow an organization, increase influence, we put every space one into everyone. We take the faces away, we take the names out of it, and we just say everyone. Everyone needs to come to our church. We love everyone. But Jesus had an amazing ability to see an individual. He saw every space one. And that's what made him, I feel like, leveraged his ability to be present. I feel like that's why he was a good responder. He was always responding. Second thing, again, the second R. He was always good at requesting. Jesus was always good at requesting. Of course, he was responsive. He was always good at responding, proving he was present. But he was always requesting, which I feel like means he was opening the process for other people to be a part of something pretty miraculous, pretty fun, pretty exciting. He was a master at inviting others into the process. And then, of course, transferring that ownership to the people who would continue his ministry after him. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I want to say this. Have you thought about the fact that Jesus was on the earth for 3 years? And his church didn't grow until he left? Have you also noticed that he was on, and I say on the planet, I know he was older than that, but I'm saying he did his ministry for 3 years. He left, then the church grew, number one. Second thing I want to say about that, in those 3 years, Jesus didn't really come across as frantic. He didn't come across in this like, I'm freaking out. It wasn't, And I think a lot of that's because he was really good about requesting things of others, meaning, hey, I'm going to invite you into this process. We're going to do this together. I'm not the show. Jesus knew he was the Savior of the universe and there was something for him to do. But the church, the thing that we lead, that was on us. And I think he knew that. And so he wasn't frantic or anything. He knew that his main role in the church building process was to request things of others, to request things of us. So I want to dive into that. But I'm going to give you some Bible verses here. Here's some more for your Bible study. Chapter 9, verse 28. He said, do you believe I can do this? I mean, like, why? Why would you ask that? Like, it seems like a redundant thing. Yeah, I know, but sometimes there's a lot of power in asking somebody to state what you think is obvious. Make them verbalize it. Chapter 9, verse 37 of Matthew, it says, the workers are few. Pray to God. I love that. That's just the foreshadowing of like, hey, this is going to be a lot of work. I'm asking you to do a lot of work. And then he said, you pray to God, which is funny because I'm standing with the Son of God. Why do I have to pray to God? Hey, get to praying. Get to praying. Again, I like how Jesus was kind of leaning in on that. Matthew 10, verse 1, he gave disciples authority to do his miracles. That's pretty amazing. He gave his disciples authority to do his miracles. That's a pretty big deal. To me, that sounds a little bit like me giving my 9-year-old the keys to my car, which sounds crazy, but that's what it says. Matthew 10, verse 9. He says, when he sends out the disciples, and he says, don't take anything with you. Trust me. And don't be afraid to accept help. Man, that's a lot of stuff. Don't take anything with you. Don't pack for the journey. Jesus is like, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. That's a big ask. I just got back from a 3-night vacation. Each one of my family members took a full suitcase and we went 4 hours away. 3 nights. He's like, hey, go change the world and grow the church. Don't take a thing with you. Big ask. But then in that same context, that same conversation, he also made another ask. Hey, don't be afraid to accept help. Man, I'm going to take another tangent here, but some of you might be limiting the growth of your organization because you don't want to take help. You, of course, don't have the boldness to ask, but even if you did and people offered it, would you accept it? That's fascinating. In today's world, I feel like you got to be, you kind of have to have this like tone about you that says, hey, I've got it all together. I'm the leader. I'm the pastor. I'm the boss. Therefore, I'm good. I don't need anything. I don't think you should be needy. I don't think you have to bleed on everybody. But I think it is okay to just know, hey, listen, okay, thank you. I'll accept that help because, again, that is inviting people into this process. That's what it says right there, Matthew 10. Matthew 10:14, be willing to leave people. There's a big one. I'd love to talk for 45 minutes on that. I won't. I just have a few minutes left. But he said, hey, be willing to leave. Like if it doesn't work out, shake the dust off your feet, move on. And again, there are some people in your church or your organization that probably need to move on. And you're spending a lot of extra energy, whether it be emotional to hang on to them or even physically talking them into sticking around when they've already mentally left you. It's okay. Your church could be for anyone, but it might not be for everyone. And that's okay. So I love that Jesus is like, hey, listen, be willing to do the hard thing of letting people leave or be okay with you doing the leaving. Chapter 10, 21, people will hate you. He just says that. People will hate you. It will be hard. Have you ever said that? So if you're a pastor at a church and you're preaching a sermon, have you ever said, hey guys, listen, I want to grow the church. It's going to be terribly hard. Chances are you haven't said that. It's not a good sales pitch. It's not a great way to sign up volunteers. But at least you would know, like if you were to do that and the people that did respond, at least you'd know what they were made of. Again, I'm not saying you have to make that your marketing strategy. I just think that Jesus was bold enough to say this is going to cost a lot because it means a lot. And so verse 10:21, people will hate you. It will be hard. Chapter 10, verse 38, if you refuse to take up your cross and follow me, you are not worthy of me. Wow, that's pretty heavy. Most of us wouldn't want to say something so bold. That's not politically correct. You sure wouldn't want the news media to get a hold of you saying those kind of things from your church. Chapter 12, verse 13, remember this is the man with the shriveled hand. And he said, hold out your hand. Well, how rude is that, Jesus? You already know you can't do that. Why would you ask something so ridiculous for him to hold out his hand? See, that's a little thing that goes a long way. That's really rough. But it's like, hey, put some effort. You want my healing power? You want me to do something special and miraculous? Go ahead, stretch out your hand. That's a big ask. Let's see where else. Some of my favorites. Chapter 14, verses 16 is where that starts. You've heard this story for years. So he fed the 5,000, but remember he said, you give them something to eat. I love that. The disciples are like, hey, listen, we're going to go over to McDonald's and get some stuff. And he's like, nah, you give them something to eat. You got it. And they look around. They probably said something really sarcastic. They were probably really upset, really offended probably. And he said, no, you give them something to eat. And they went and made it work. 14:29 to Peter, he said, come. Remember this one, Peter's going to go walk on water. So right after the 5,000, they got on a boat, went somewhere else. And Peter's like, hey, if it's really you, Jesus, tell me to come out and walk on the water. I don't think Jesus was like, I don't think Peter was 100% like serious. I really don't. Maybe he was. And we like to give Peter all the credit for that faith. But again, this is the same guy that denied Christ around the campfire too. So let's read it kind of in context here. I think he was saying it because he's like bold and brash and abrasive and he's real cocky. Let's go. And Jesus is like, okay, Come on. I think it took Peter a good 10 minutes to get out of that boat. He's like, oh, I didn't think you were really going to say yes. That's a big ask. Side note, there are some people that are asking you for things and you probably just need to go ahead and give it to them. They want leadership? Give them leadership. Let's see what they do with it. Now, you need to be willing, and okay if they leave. You need to be willing to let them fail. It's okay if things break on purpose or with a purpose. It's okay if we don't make the same mistakes twice, but we can fail once. But I like that Jesus is like, okay, big talker, let's go. And then Peter, as best I can tell, is the only human in time to ever walk on water. Chapter 19, verse 21. This is one of my favorites too. Remember, he's talking to the rich young ruler. He said, go sell all that you have. Come back. Let's see how serious you are. All right, you can follow me. This will be great. No problem. You are already so close to perfection. Then he says, but if you really want to be perfect, go sell everything you have and come follow me. I think we all know the rest of that story. Did not happen. All right, write this down. Write this down. If you want to lead like Jesus, you have to be willing to make unreasonable requests. I think if you want to lead like Jesus, you have to be willing to make unreasonable requests. An essential leadership development skill that Jesus had and leveraged every day, as best I can tell in his ministry, was that he pulled out potential. He didn't simply just suggest it was in there. You don't point at potential and be like, good leader. No, if you're going to be a builder of leaders and even a finder of leaders, a miner, a refiner of leaders, you're going to have to pull out potential, not just point out potential. Okay. I'm a big fan of the military, including your military, all militaries, not from any sort of political side or angle. I just love the training and the hustle, the grind, the commitment that those people have. And so I do a lot of study of like Navy SEALs. That's kind of our superheroes over here. Maybe you've heard of some of their stories, but there's a cool series on, it's old now, but it's a cool series. You can find it on YouTube. And it follows the training of this Navy SEAL class. And I study, again, a lot of them because they do some of the toughest stuff. Some people say it's the hardest training in the world, which I feel like is very relevant to church work. I really do. I know it's a different context. It might not be physically painful, but there's a unique commitment and conviction that these Navy SEALs or these trainees have that I feel like we need to have, that same mindset. So, I'm watching that. And during the training and during one of these shows, the interviewer's asking one of these, these, I guess, platoon sergeants or whatnot doing the training. And he says, man, what's the deal? What's the point? And the guy says this, he says, the goal is to make everyone question their desire for being here. The goal of like that Navy SEAL training, because they've already been in the military. They've been in the Navy, the Army, whatever. This is now this is pro level, like military stuff. And he says, the goal is to make everyone question their desire for being here. And then how they answer that question in their own minds directly affects their output and their success or their quitting. Again, I don't know that we need to scream and cuss at people. I don't know that we have to make them go, 48 hours without sleep like they would do in Navy SEAL training. I'm not saying that. But I do think there are times, more times than not, that you need to raise the bar when you've been lowering the bar. I think it's okay if people go, man, I don't know. I thought church was supposed to be easier than this. Now, again, I'm talking about church leadership. This is not the gospel message for people who don't know Jesus. Do anything and everything you can to connect people who don't know Jesus to Jesus. Absolutely. But in terms of like leadership and building the church, I'm okay if some people question their ability to do what we ask them to do. Sometimes I'm trying to raise that bar. I love that. I'll give you a quick story. For me, I've seen this in my life and I've seen it pan out in good ways. It's not necessarily because I have any more faith than anybody else. Sometimes it's just because I'm kind of crazier than other people. Kind of like Jonathan in the story and his armor bearer, and they go pick a fight with the Philistines. Sometimes we think that's a faith story. I think it's a story of naivety. I think he was young and crazy, and he instigated something, and that's what God responded to. That's a separate sermon. You don't have to pay for that. That's a bonus. But anyway, I have a story for you too. So I was about 30 years old. My wife and I, we moved, and she was pregnant at this time. We had moved from Colorado, on the other side of our country, over to Charlotte, where Elevation Church is. And I could not get Elevation Church to give me a job. I was so mad. And we had served and volunteered. We were tithing. We were working really hard, but we were also hungry. I didn't have a job. I thought I was going to work at church. And so all that to say, I went and we decided, hey, all right, I'll go get a job doing something else. I will change careers. My career for life has basically been in ministry. And now that wasn't working out. I wasn't getting paid to do that. So I needed to find another job. So I went and took a job at a restaurant, a hamburger restaurant. I intentionally picked that restaurant. I wanted to own that restaurant. I wanted to jump right into management. I was going to take this seriously, change careers, because I knew that God had called us to that church more than I felt like he had called me to vocational ministry. Now follow me here. I felt like we had to pick. Did you call us to Elevation Church or did you call us to vocational ministry? Because those two weren't lining up right now. So which one is it? So we can't just sit by and wait for God to figure it out and make a burning bush in the yard. We had to do something. So we took action. My wife, again, pregnant. And so she has this baby. She's not going to work, or at least that was our goal, our hope. So I took a job at this restaurant, and I walked out of the restaurant having gotten the job. And I was on my way home. It took me 11 minutes to get from that restaurant to my house. In that time, I received a text message from our executive pastor at Elevation who was essentially offering me a job. And I got a job in that 11 minutes. And here's what I felt like God was saying. He said, I just wanted to see how far you'd go. I didn't know what I had to work with. Are you willing to like give up what you think is the calling and the dream to do what's necessary to still grow the church and do what you feel like I've asked you to do on this front? Like, pick one. God's like, pick one. I'll bless it. I just need you to pick one. I need you to do something. I need you to question your desire for being here, like that trainer said in the Navy SEAL training. And when I picked one, then God's like, great, I'll bless that then. And he gave me a job at Elevation Church. 10 years later, I got to be a part of launching 11 out of 20 campuses. It's what moved me to Florida. I have amazing friends. I am talking to you now because I did that thing that I just told you. So I've seen that work. I've seen what it's like to be the rich young ruler, but then actually do the thing of selling all you have and coming back. I've seen that. I'm not saying I'm the greatest in the world. I'm not saying that maybe you can't do that. That's fine. But man, I would challenge you to kind of lean in that direction. And even more so, as a leader, ask others to do something crazy like that. Because now that I've lived that, I can sit across the table from people and tell them, hey, you need to quit your job and move. I don't care that you don't have money. I don't care that you think it's hard. And I've done that. Our campus pastor in the city of Orlando right now, I asked him to quit his job, and the next day he got fired. You can follow him on Instagram. You can go find him. You can ask him this question, but that's a true story. I didn't get him fired, but I'm not saying I didn't get him fired. And now, it turns out a few years later, he's now my campus pastor in Orlando. So make big asks. Do that. Jesus did that very thing. Now, the opposite is true too. In Mark 6, if you remember this quick story where Jesus couldn't do miracles in his own hometown because the people had no faith. They were like, who's this guy? I've seen him in diapers, so I can't receive miracles from him. I've seen him in diapers. Think about that. So if you don't make big asks and you don't demand big things from the people that you're trying to raise up and the people that you lead, you're going to get what you ask for, which is a low bar, low production. It's going to be a pretty small, sad, ineffective church. And you probably just ought to go work at a bank. That guy on that Navy SEAL training video, he said this: you can't yell enough. There comes a point where you just got to stop yelling and you got to let time do the work of clarifying the calling. You got to let time do it. I had gotten antsy after 9 months, and I finally got to the point of like, all right, no one's going to hire me. I'll just go get a job elsewhere. And that's when God's like, got it. And then panned out. I'm talking to you today because of that very thing. Listen to this. You might be leaving potential untapped because you're simply not willing to make big requests of the people you lead. You're leaving a ton of potential untapped because you won't make big requests of the people that you lead. You're probably saying someone's no for them. Don't say somebody's no for them. Ask them a question, make them say no. But don't do it for them. Don't rob them of what could be. A couple of practical questions. What are you doing that someone else could do? Are you teaching? Someone else can do that. Are you singing? Are you writing? Are you opening up the building in the morning? Are you closing the building down in the afternoon? Are you doing graphic design? If you're a senior pastor doing graphic design, that's guaranteed to fail to be your lid right there. Not that you can't do graphic design, maybe you grew up doing that, but if you're doing creative work, you are robbing a lot of teenagers out there who are better at it than you are. Give it to them. Are you running sound? No. If you're in front of the camera, you can't run the sound, okay? Are you still buying supplies? You can't give somebody your credit card? Maybe even this meeting. Is there an opportunity for you to bring somebody else into this meeting and watch this, but you thought, nah, it's not really for you? Open it up. We're not talking about state secrets here. Open it up. And you have to figure out the context for you and your leadership, in your city, in the language barrier. I don't know. You have to figure that out. But chances are there's a lot more you could do and you could give off to other people if you just would make the big ask. So find what only you can do. Find what only you can do. All right, last R, 3 R's. Remember, he was good at responding. He was good at requesting, and he was really good at resourcing. He was good at resourcing. He was always good at like just figuring it out. Now, I understand Jesus was the hope of the world and, you know, fully God, fully man, and he could do miracles that you and me couldn't do. But of course, he also said in scripture that you're going to do more miracles than this. So maybe we can do it. He was very resourceful. I'm going to give you Bible examples. Remember, he fed the 5,000 with just a couple of loaves of bread and a couple of fish. Remember, he fed the 4,000 right after that. Remember that he paid taxes with the coin that came out of the fish's mouth in Matthew 17. Remember when he healed the blind man because he spit in the dirt and made some mud? That's resourceful. Remember in the Garden of Eden, not the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Gethsemane, where he put back on the dude's ear with nothing? He was very resourceful. Jesus seemed, and more than resourceful, here's the attitude he had. He never seemed to scramble. He never seemed to scramble. Remember, he wasn't frantic. He had 3 years to completely change all of humanity and never came across frantic. Never seemed to freak out about it. He was resourceful. I'm going to finish with a little list for you. I got about 8 minutes left. I'm going to finish with this list for you. But on the topic of resourcing, Jesus knew the future of his church depended on one specific valuable resource more than all others: leaders. Leaders. The thing about a valuable resource, I wrote this down this way. The thing about a valuable resource is that it has to be mined and refined or built and deployed. But almost everything of value in your life, I bet you haven't just walked over and found it and picked it up. That's not how you raised your kids. That took a ton of effort. It is still taking effort. If you have grown kids, I bet it's still taking effort. I have a 6-year-old and 9-year-old. I don't know that the effort's ever going to end, but maybe it's because I'm a bad parent. I don't know. But the point is, the things of value, especially leaders, people, humans, are hard. It's going to take some mining, some refining, some digging, some dirty work. It's going to take that. I feel like Jesus knew that. He was good at that. And he focused on those things, but he had the right mindset. He wasn't looking to find leaders. He was going to build them. Remember, he was just walking on the street, saw Matthew, and was like, hey, yeah, you'll work out. Now, remember, Matthew was kind of a weird gangster dude, and nobody liked him. He's a tax collector. Remember the fishermen, especially Peter, who always cussed a lot. He probably drank a lot of beer. He probably did a lot of crazy things. He probably spoke in tongues or something. You know, Peter was weird. Peter was weird. But sure enough, Jesus did a lot of good stuff in and through him on this rock, on Peter. You know what? I'll tell you what, I'll build this church. He was resourceful, but he didn't just find good leaders. The disciples weren't like a hit list of all the amazing people in the world. They weren't NFL players. They weren't soccer players or European football players. They weren't NBA players. Nothing about them was sexy. He made them, he built them, and that is your job to do as a leader, is to build more leaders. So with that being said, I want to give you these are quick reminders. I'll try to fly through these pretty quick. 5 quick reminders about mining and refining in the leadership context. Here's some quick things you can do to remind you, again, or to create this parallel between mining and refining, this digging, this dirty work, and putting that in the context of leadership. 5 quick things. Number 1, the value is all around you. There's value everywhere. So before you do anything, can you just believe that? Can you just believe that? You have all you need to do all that God has asked you to do. Let me say that again. You have all you need to do all that God has asked you to do. He's not asking you to do something without providing something, the resource to make it happen. Now, can you perceive it? That's a different story. So leaders too, they're there. You just can't see them beneath things like maybe your preferences. Well, she's funny. He's loud. They don't do this. They don't do that. Maybe their pain. Man, that person's really needy. Well, maybe they just need one friend one time to correct their perspective and they'll be fine now. Maybe you have other priorities. So they're hidden behind your preferences, their pain, and maybe your other priorities. Maybe that's why you can't see leaders, but the value is there. The value is there. It's possible you're in a leadership deficit simply because you don't perceive what's present. I wonder if some of you might not even know a leader if they walked up to you. Do you even know what you're looking for? Number 2, well, let me repeat that for you. Number 1, the value is all around you. Number 2, expect to do dirty work. Expect to do dirty work. Digging is dirty, but it's where the value is. It's where the value is. There's a lot of TV shows now on certain like Discovery Network, all these different channels there's like a whole series on gold mining. I find that so fascinating. And they've got these massive tractors, this massive machinery digging full on like the sides of the mountains, just digging them out so that they can get ounces of gold. Ounces of gold. Think about that. They literally hold in a jar the value that took them acres of mountain moving to find. Think about that. And we just want to find leaders to build the church with. We just want to find them on a Sunday afternoon. No way. You have to be willing to do the dirty work. My dad said this. Maybe you've heard this, like an old preacher joke. He said, ministry would be great if it wasn't for the people. And that's true. Parenting would be awesome if it wasn't for the kids. But that's not how it works. We're building something substantial in the lives of our kids. It's going to hurt. it's going to take some dirty work. That's just how it works. My kids are my like leadership development school. That's what they are for me. If I can do it with them, I can probably do it with anybody. And that's how I see it. That's actually how it works. And so I'm digging down deep. I'm pulling out potential that they don't even know they have, by the way. But sometimes you have to believe for others before they can believe for themselves. Are you doing that? That's dirty work. So they're great leaders. I know my kids are. Someday. I've seen a little bit of it now, but I know they're great leaders. Someday. And I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it so. I'm not going to see it. I'm going to make it so. So you don't find leaders, you form leaders. You were formed yourself, by the way. Here's the people that formed me: my parents, my teachers, my friends, my mentors. God himself formed you, knit you together in your mother's womb. So you were formed. So don't expect to find in full form what God took years to make in you. You know, that's true for dieting too. You've been eating unhealthy and drinking unhealthy for years, and you want to do a 10-day fast to all of a sudden get healthy? That's not how it works. It's not how it works in any other place in your life. So it's not going to work here in developing leaders. Proverbs 14:4 says this: without oxen, a stable stays clean, but you need a strong ox for a large harvest. Do you want to harvest, or do you want to stay clean? Proverbs 14:4. Do you want to harvest, or do you want to stay clean? Practical questions for you. What equipment do you have to get what you want? Remember that example I gave you about that TV show, that gold mining show? They move acres of dirt. They will tear down whole mountains to find the value that literally fits in a small jar. Literally. You've seen this. Watch it. Go Google it. It's amazing what they will move, the equipment they use to mine for that valuable resources. And here's where I think you need to, here's how I think you need to do it. You need to be bold and ask some pretty hard questions. Again, you don't find leaders. And so you're never going to build a good leader by asking, hey man, how you doing? You're never going to build a good leader by saying, hey, would you like to show up tomorrow? You're never going to build a good leader that way. You're going to have to spend some time with people. Ask about their pains and their frustrations. Make a big ask. I tell you what, come early tomorrow. I want you to walk with me for the next 4 hours. Hey, I tell you what, I got this ministry trip I need to travel to. Would you come with me? Hey, I'm going to watch this video of some crazy American guy talking to us about stuff. Will you watch it with me? Like, you're going to have to do some pretty bold things and push the envelope a little bit. Probably even open up and be a little bit vulnerable and do that. Number three, what you want isn't pretty yet. What you want isn't pretty yet. You've got to know what it looks like in raw form. Do you know what that gold dust looks like as gold dust? Do you know what it looks like in raw form? Do you know what the dirt around it is? When you start to see like this mess over here, do you go, oh wait, I've seen this mess before. There's going to be good stuff under that. Do you know the difference? Can you identify the value in the dirt? Do you have a list of potential traits, for example? Do you even know what you're looking for? Because the preparation is just as important as the process. I mean, you got to get this thing ready. Make sure your equipment works. Make sure you even have equipment. And then let's get to work on it. Let's get to work on processing. I look for things like this. Do they take initiative? Are they biased towards action? I want them moving. I want Peters and Jonathans on my team. I want people that go crazy and do crazy things, because I can work with that. I can rein that back in. But if I have to be your motivation, I don't know if you're ever going to be the leader that's going to help me. So I look for that. Consistency. I don't care if it's boring. Is it always boring? I don't care if you're crazy. Are you always crazy? Do I know what I'm getting? Consistency, boldness, wit, grit, teachability, humility. Humility, by the way, is not meekness and quietness and fear. Humility just understands, we don't need to talk about me. I'm just going to go win. You can do that. Here's what's not on my list. Well, they're always there. They're always available. They'll do whatever I ask. I never, ever want a leader on my team that describes. Number 4, refining costs more. When you are refining something, it costs a lot. It costs more energy, more time, more focus, more ego. It costs more of your preferences. It's a high emotional output as a leader, developer, as a refiner of leaders. You're spending some energy on that. You can't use what you found in raw form. Not everybody will see what you see. Nobody's going to give you money for the mud. They're paying you, so to speak, to refine the value. You said it's in there. Prove it to me. So refining is going to cost you something. And in this case, sometimes even literal. It's going to cost you maybe some lunches, some dinners. It's going to cost you some new equipment. It's going to cost you some training. It's going to cost you maybe sending one of your leaders to another city to do a conference or whatever. It's going to cost you something. Do you have a system to refine this value that you found? It's in the dirt. It's there. We know that. But now you need a system to refine it. Here's a caveat, though, to that. Does your system involve heat and pressure? Does your system involve heat and pressure? Your refining process can't simply be sifting. It's not really how it works. And I know that you can find gold that way, but even then, you can't spend that at the grocery store. You need heat and pressure to get the thing that you really want to spend, the thing that you really want to use. Remember, if you're going to lead like Jesus, you have to be willing to make unreasonable requests. You won't build the leaders you need without doing the uncomfortable, emotionally taxing work of refinement. And you can have programs for that. I can help with this later offline. Follow me on Instagram. Let's connect. We'll figure it out. But like there's an internship type program. You can probably build some sort of protege program. You can build in a one-on-one system where you're talking with them once a week. Do you have a system where you can just invite the same leaders over to your house and just let them see how you do life? Because it's one thing to just tell them something in a nice scripted sermon. It's another thing for them to see your reactions when your coffee's not made right. That's leadership development. That's a unique vulnerability. Maybe clear expectations. You need to include that in your system. Don't assume they understand what you're saying. Provide clear expectations. Think about Jesus. Remember, he would teach in a parable, and he would grab the disciples, the leaders he was building. He would grab them, take them over here and say, here's what I meant. Here's what I was telling them. And then also, here's another thing. Are you inspecting what you expect? Are you inspecting, looking at what you are expecting? Meaning, are you holding people accountable? Like if people are not doing good, do they know that? Don't get mad at them if they don't know. And then number five, on the mining and refining part, you need to use what you've made. You need to use what you've made. Gold is really pretty, but it is absolutely useless if you're not using it. The value is only realized when you spend it, when it's used. Stock market, same thing. Man, I'm worth $1 billion in the stock market. Well, not really. When you spend it, maybe. But even then, at least in my country, I got to give like 40% of that back. So it's not realized until it's used. It's not realized until it's used. You got to use what you've made. Again, you've probably got great leaders around you. Some of them probably came 90% done. They're probably really close, but you don't know it because you're not using it. And that's on you. You got to be a wielder of this weapon of leadership. I've seen more leaders quit because of boredom and misappropriation than I have misappropriation of their gifts. I've seen more leaders quit from that and boredom than because something got hard or uncomfortable. If they're leaders, if they're hustlers, if they're winners, if they're the people you want to build the church on, they'll come back when it's tough, but they won't come back if they're bored. Peter, good example. They won't come back if they're bored. You got to use the leaders you have. A couple examples. Give them responsibility. Give them something. Give them something. Not something to hold, but something to steward. Let them come up with a time, how it's going to work, tell them to make it better, give them a time frame, give them something, give them responsibility, and then take your hands off. Take your hands off of it. Don't micromanage. Along the way, here's another thing you can do. I think this is one of the things that most leader builders don't do. I feel like this might be the rarest thing that happens in leader building. Please celebrate them. I don't think you have to always like build them up and worship them, okay? But I do think it's good for them to know, are they on the right track? Celebrate their progress. Point out where they're doing good so they can do more good, okay? Don't always be the guy that's pointing out the bad. Don't assume they know what's good. Point out, hey, do more of that. You're awesome at that. Do more of that. And of course, last but not least, ask for feedback. Ask for feedback. That'll be a game changer. Let them speak into your situation sometimes. Again, I think there should be a healthy respect level of hierarchy and honor level in the org chart. I absolutely think that should be there. But in certain circles, or even in small one-on-one settings, your leaders, are you allowing them to provide feedback from their point of view? You'd be surprised at how much that'll inspire, motivate, and kind of fuel a leader to go further. I have a little book, and Simon mentioned it before. He'll mention it again, I'm sure. There'll be a link somewhere. I just wrote this little ebook it's about a 20-minute read. Shouldn't be very difficult, but I feel like it's real helpful, called Owner's Manual. It's about ownership in the church. And so it'll explain a lot of this stuff as well. Maybe that'll help you. So I'll just finish with this. Hey, listen, I'm going to remind you of 3 things. God has provided you with all you need to do all that he's called you to do. It's there. It's there. If he called you to do it, if you're sitting in this room right now watching this thing, and I'm speaking to you in any way, any of this has hit you, just know God has already resourced you to do all that he's asked you to do, okay? Just don't get so creative that you make it difficult, or make difficult what really should be simple. Don't overthink this thing. Don't overthink it. It's a relatively simple process to grab somebody, bring them along, and build leaders. You might be frustrated because you're overthinking that you're just going to go find leaders, but you got to build them. You got to make them. Got to refine that too. And last, don't miss the value all around you because you don't want to do the dirty work. That's the preference side of it. Your preferences, leave those at the door. Now that you're a follower of Jesus and a leader of his church, your preferences are the last thing on our list of importance. The last thing. Don't miss the value around you because you don't want to do the dirty work. I'm going to pray for you, and then we're going to be done. Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for who we get to do life with around the world, the ministries we get to work with, the church we get to build, your church. Thank you for a while we get to do this. Bless this audience now with favor, with perspective, with energy, with focus. Help them to see and seize opportunities ahead of them to do the most good, to build leaders, to activate people, activate the faith in people. Help them to believe for others until maybe they can believe for themselves. But that's what leaders do, is they influence people, they move people, they build other leaders. Again, thank you for this opportunity. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Thank you all.